Sorry.
And are you able to record on your end as well?
I will do it. No, you need to give us permission.
Let me see. All right.
So it's recording. I don't know if it's going to cloud or it's going to local computer, but it doesn't matter. It's recording somewhere.
Right. All right. So we have a few guests in already. I would like to welcome my friends who are here. Thank you for joining in. It's an author event. I'm very delighted to introduce our friends, Rahul and Galyna, who has co-authored.
Krishna, could you give me admin rights so that I can mute people if
Yeah,
need be?
sure. More. The only thing that it says is make host. Is that what you want to do?
Which is what it is. It is. Okay, yeah, make host.
Is that co-host?
It's fine. I'll then make everybody co-host.
All right. And so I have a pro account. So in case we need to go over 50 minutes, just switch me back, or if you want to record it, that's fine. I wanted to welcome everybody today to this author event. We have Rahul and Galyna with us. And thank you for your patience. It got us a second to get started. I'm delighted to have them. We have been chatting from two ends of the planet. They are in Singapore and I am on the East Coast, and we are 13 hours apart, but we made it work. And I really wanted to invite them to speak about their new book, An Atheist Gets the Gita. It is published by Rupa in India, and I've read most of it by now. I haven't finished it, Rahul, I'm sorry. But I see what is happening in that book, and I come to the book from the vantage point of an academic scholar. And so my study of the Gita has been very different. And Rahul and Galyna's approach is that of a communicator, a public communicator. So yesterday when we were chatting, I said, this concept actually comes from Madhvacharya and Baladevi Vidyabhushana, and says, and so they got everything right. The book is perfect as it is, and it's actually very relatable. One of the difficulties we have as academic scholars is we speak in a language called academies, and not everybody gets it. So it was delightful to see that some of the traditional stuff that we read in Sanskrit is actually translated in in everyday English. So without further delay, I'd like to start hearing from Rahul and Galyna. We decided to break our session into 3 small chunks. In the first chunk, we all want to share our common thread, which is how we connected with the Bhagavad Gita and what brought 3 of us who are, who didn't know each other last year together on the same podcast. And then we'd open up the floor to Rahul and Galyna to share some of the key ideas on the theme of today's meeting, which is, why is the Bhagavad Gita still relevant today? Right? And of course, many people have many answers to that, but we'd like to hear the authorial voice here. And then we'll open it up to our friends who have joined us today morning. And we want to field questions from them. I'll be the moderator for today's conversation. And then once we are all satisfied, we will call it a day, right? So thank you, Rahul and Galyna, for joining us. Thank you, our friends who are here today. I look forward to having you here for the entire show. If you can, please keep your cameras on, so that makes it very personal. It's easier for people to speak to people rather than blank screens. So thank you for that. And yes, ladies first, Galyna, why don't you tell us your story of how you got the Bhagavad Gita? It's a fascinating story, Galyna.
Before thank you so much, Abhishek, for giving me the floor and letting me to speak first. I was, before I even got hold of the Gita, before I even got it into my hands, I had a personal story of my personal quest, and I was telling it to my friends and to Rahul also at some point in time that ever since I remember myself, when the humans start speaking in sentences, when they start getting the second signal system, the language and all, the first question which I was asking, I was always thinking, and I was asking myself, who am I? So it was very weird, because I was like, why am I? What is I? Why I am? All this kind of like wordplay was going on in my brain. And then also, why are we here? Why my family is my family? Why was I not born at my neighbor's house, for example? So all these kind of questions is like, I don't think I even ask anybody what it all means, because probably I didn't know that I can ask somebody. But then when I was slightly bigger, like maybe 5 years old, and in those days you still have, the earth was not as polluted as it is now. So you look at the skies are clear, and then you see the stars, and then you see the planets. And I was asking my mom, I was lucky that my mom was a math and physics teacher, so she could explain things to me in a very good way. And I was like, Mom, what is it there? Why is it so huge, so big? What is this? She told me this is universe. And I'm like, oh, where does it end? And she says it doesn't end anywhere, because it's endless. So my 5-year-old mind was just like blown totally, like, what endless? I mean, how? I mean, I can't imagine. I told Mommy, I can't imagine. How is it endless? And she's like, you can't imagine because it's very difficult to imagine, but it is endless. So you just accept it. Yeah. So that was pretty much it. And then, so this quest never left me. I was like, well, what is this? What is that? Why am I here? What am I doing here? It was going on and off. And then I grew up my childhood was actually, I was born in the USSR. So USSR is now the history, but that was our part of our life. That was our present. That was our, the kind of the conditions we were living in. So you are officially a communist country and a communist ideology, and you are officially an atheist country. So there is no such thing as explaining anything about the existence other than matter. So physical matter. So your matter, basically. And then I remember I was reading in my history books about some Scythian civilizations, which they died, and then they found the tombs of those people, and then they found the golden jewelries, and I was like, oh my gosh, all of us are gonna die, and the only thing which is gonna be left after us is just jewelry, and then we are just these ashes, and then I'm nobody, and then there will be no me, and there was no me before I was born. I mean, this just didn't stick with me. So I was in a very young age, and then it was so daunting when I just realized that I was coming out to the streets, and I was like looking like doomed. Oh gosh, all these people are going to die one day, and there will be the time when I will be dead, and there will be 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds who will be going out to the street, seeing me old walking on the street. It was just so it was this was a quest, so, but we couldn't get any kind of information. My mom, our parents did try not to tell anything to us, like they're believers, but they didn't say anything to us, because the moment the kids, you tell children, don't say anything out in the street, what is spoken in the home, because you're not happy with communism, you're not happy with atheism, but you can't tell the kids, so because they say something, and then tomorrow the parents lost their job, and and some of them might go to jail and all that. So that was a very serious problem. It's like what I'm talking now is no less than what you're talking about North Korea. So when something like that is discovered, you're done. So but luckily it was like almost the very end of the USSR, so all sorts of literatures were somehow going in. And there was a lot of literature which was circulated around, which was typewritten, all sorts of stuff. I think at that time there was something on Swami Vivekananda already. There were some other things, all typewritten. And the copies were distributed underground, and you're not supposed to tell anyone that you have this kind of literature. So my brother, I think, I mean, he probably remembers the story much better, how he got that book to home. But I mean, he was attending the yoga classes, and then over there, if you're doing yoga and physical education, that's okay. That's not considered religion. So, and I guess there were people who that was like the very end of 80s, almost like 1990 something around there. So they brought the Bhagavad Gita, and somehow my brother got the Bhagavad Gita, which was a photocopy of a photocopy of the typewritten, we call it like self-printed book, which was underground. And that was the copy of the book, which was smuggled by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada which was brought by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the USSR when he came. Yeah, so, and then this book was translated, rough translation into Russian first, and then, all these crude copies of that, and it was circulated. And interestingly, there were people who were interested in that kind of knowledge. So that book ended up in our house, and then I was trying to read that, and I was like, Krishna, Sanjaya, some Krishna, who's Krishna? I don't know who's Krishna, nobody could really explain Krishna. So then, I mean, that was the first encounter. Then, luckily for good, USSR was no more there. So, then these things like religion was not banned anymore. So there was like influx of all sorts of literature. So we had a more or less much better translation of Bhagavad Gita. It had some pictures. And when we got this first properly printed Bhagavad Gita, it was like, wow, so nice. You can read it now. So I started reading that, and that was a good, it answered my questions. It answered my quest, actually. Who am I? Because everything is written there. Everything, what is the soul? What is the nature? What is there beyond? And who is God? Your relationship, and all that was actually pretty much all the questions were answered. Yes. So that was my story. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very personal and very enlightening. And it's, sometimes we think that there are accidents in life, but maybe not. Rahul, why don't we hear your story? And that's also reflected in the book. You want to share?
Yeah,
sure. And also, by the way, for our audiences, if I may, Rahul and Galyna are also a couple in real life. So it's an interesting, the story, the plot thickens.
Yeah, so that's an incidental, and as you said, there are no accidents. And there is a famous dialogue that comes in this movie Kung Fu Panda, where this Shenshei tells this panda that there are no accidents in life. So I didn't really believe in that, because I was like, I don't believe that everything is planned or there is a method to madness. Nonetheless, what now I know with the bit of wisdom of hindsight is that life is a puzzle that fits more backwards than forwards, right? You can try to make meaning of what happened, why, here, there. As and when it's happening, it doesn't make sense. But then when you look life backwards, it seems like it's all making sense. And I'll just give you one example before I go into answering your question directly, which is relevant to what you just said. So, when I was writing this book, and that also was an inspiration to write this book. It's a story in its own. But when I was writing this book, then I was doing some research and I'd also seen some videos. So there is a very famous Mahabharata series, which was made in the late 1980s in India by B.R. Chopra. So in that B.R. Chopra Ramayana, that version, there is a dialogue that happens between Krishna and Arjuna. Obviously, in Ved Vyasa's Mahabharata, that dialogue doesn't happen, or it's at least not in that simplistic manner. But in that discussion, Arjuna is asking Krishna, would you become my charioteer? So Arjuna is asking Krishna, Krishna, would you become my charioteer? And to that, Krishna replies that probably I was born on the planet so that I could become your charioteer. That was my purpose of birth. And that somehow stuck with me when I was in the middle of writing this book, that I happened to chance upon this video, and I was like, now when I look my life backwards, whether it was my quest to become a theoretical physicist, or whether it was my studying management education, or whether it was, as you say, accidentally, but we know there are no accident, meeting Galyna or some other people that I'll talk about in a minute. And they all just culminated into this book. Whatever I knew until that point in time, and that answers your other opening remark you made about relatability, because I have gone to the business school. I have also studied some engineering. And by that token, I know how the mind of a modern quote unquote Indian, I mean, I know the audience is Indian and non-Indian here, but like, let me just say Indian here, how a modern Indian brain works. It is living in India, but it is for all practical purposes an Anglo-Saxon brain, because it's trained in the Lord Macaulay School of Education, which is very Western inclined. Now, my journey of how I discovered Bhagavad Gita is very different from Galyna's. And when I say different from Galyna's, what I mean is Galyna's discovery of Bhagavad Gita came with a query: who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this life? What is my relationship with others? So those are the questions that she was pondering over. To me, these were non-relevant questions because these were already answered. When I went to my science classes, to my biology and chemistry classes, they told me I'm a bag of chemicals embodied in this skin. In my brain, there are some reactions happening, which are giving me this feeling of consciousness, and that is who I am. And that was very firmly embedded into my head. So I was not seeking answer to this question, who am I? Because I very much knew who I am. So if we want to like bucket me, then I would be what is called Charvaka in the Indian philosophy system, where you have Shad Darshana and you have Charvaka and you have Shramana Darshana. So I would be quote unquote a Charvaka. So so I was not looking to answer this question. But then when I finished my MBA and I came back to Singapore, incidentally, I met some people through, again, a series of accidents, who had created this forum. It's called Artha Forum. And Artha, there is a dual meaning. Artha means meaning. Artha literally means meaning, but it also means wealth or money. So the tagline of this Artha Forum was modern businesses, ancient wisdom. So the idea was, can we apply ancient wisdom into modern businesses? And in that forum in Singapore, it was in Singapore, they also have it in LA, in Dubai, in Tokyo, in a lot of Mumbai, in a lot of top business centers in the world, where the question they were trying to answer, the tagline basically says it all. It says, ancient wisdom, modern businesses. And then they used to get Vedic scholars to talk about things like conscious capitalism, talk about things like, should you only be caring about profit, or are planet and people important? Is sustainability a part of this? And now, suddenly now in the 21st century, all this is something which is being taught in the universities. We're talking about conscious capitalism, we are talking about ESG, we are talking about sustainability. So everything which was development in the previous century, whether it was gas guzzling engines, or whether it was plastic, or factories with big chimneys, today when we talk about development, it's undoing those things. If you can produce without those tall chimneys, if you can produce cars which do not produce pollution, or if you can have a sustainable way of packaging things which is not covering the planet into plastic, that is development. So we're talking about these topics only now. But in this Artha Forum, I had heard some of the very eloquent speakers speak about these topics. So my interest came from there, that hey, these guys are talking about doing business in a sustainable way. That was my interest. And then when I analyzed some of the people who came to those forums, these were billionaires and millionaires who were coming. One common thing I realized is all of them had, without a fail, studied the Bhagavad Gita. And then I thought, okay, because these guys have studied this book, maybe I should also read that. And when I opened that book, because until that point, I was taking this book as a quote unquote religious book. So I was like, I'm not interested in religion. I don't need it. And when I opened this book, that's when I realized that it's a practical book. Even if you take the divinity and religious aspect out of the book, and then you ask the question, is there anything practical in this book? And the answer is a lot, a lot, and a lot. So much so that today I've come to the conclusion that my entire education system was probably a farce, probably meaningless, because it taught me, like, let's say you come to the university, it teaches you, you know what you want to be. You know you want to be an engineer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be an accountant. And these universities and colleges, they give you skills, they teach you how. They teach you some skills, will tell you how to become an engineer, how to become a doctor, how to become an accountant. But where they fail fundamentally is why. Why do you want to be an engineer? Why do you want to be a doctor? And that was the question which even Arjuna was asking, right? He was in the battlefield, but he didn't know why he was there. What was his purpose there? So to that effect, I think that is the clarity that the Bhagavad Gita gave me. And my journey was slightly oblique, not from a self-inquiry purpose, but more from the angle of does the book talk anything which can be of practical value of how you deal with the environment around you, more so in the business context.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think each one of us have a particular journey into the same realm. And my journey was very different from both of yours. In fact, I have a picture of myself when I was 6 months old. And in India, one of the things they do is on your 6th month, when you start eating grains, they put a lot of stuff on a plate. They put money, they put a book, they put grains, and then they wait for the baby to hold something, like pick something up. And of course, when I was 6 months old, I did not know how to read. But when I saw that picture many years later, I noticed I picked up the Gita. And so somehow somebody had the wisdom of putting that book there. And without knowing, I had picked it up. And then when I was very young, about 7, 8 years old, my grandfather, his name was Harit Bhushan Sarkar, gave me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I didn't know what to make of it. And he asked me a very difficult question. He said, Krishna says here that Chatur Varna Maya Srishta, that the 4 Varnas, the 4 orders of society are created by me, divided by guna and karma, right? Now, you can translate guna as their talent and karma as their activity. But in India, a very warped version of that division of labor exists in the form of caste system. And so my grandfather asked me this question: why would Krishna, who is, Bhagavan, create such a cruel system like the caste system? So here's the book, the questions here, the answers are here, you figure it out and let me know. And I had no answer. And that's the kind of training he and I had, very informal. You would just sit together in the evenings and discuss Bhagavata and the Gita. And by, I went to a Catholic school and I kind of just dropped everything. I was seriously into Jesus, and I still like Jesus Christ. I think he's a wonderful prophet, very compassionate. But it was not till I was, about 11 years old that I picked this thing back again. And it was, again, casual. By the time I was 18, I was convinced I'm going to join the Merchant Navy. Everything was set. And by accident, and yet not quite by accident, I met someone who was a German Jew from New York who had become a Hindu monk and was doing his PhD at Cambridge. He also happened to be one of the closest people to Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. His name was Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he and I had some exchange of letters in the late 90s, and I was not very submissive. I was very challenging. And he agreed to come and stay at my place and speak with me. And he was there, and we had some of the most intense conversations of my life. And I can still vouch that it was one of the most intense conversations after 21 years, right? And he was the one who gradually took me out of my ideas of joining the Merchant Navy. And he pointed, I'm paraphrasing, he pointed to the fact that this world has enough successful people. There are enough, merchant navies, ship captains, there are enough marine engineers, there are enough doctors. There aren't enough teachers. There aren't enough healers. There aren't enough people who can understand the depth of their own tradition and show others the way. And so he wanted me to enter the university, study humanities. And Rahul probably knows this. In India, if a male child studies the humanities, it's the social death of the family. It's like, you are the pinnacle of failure. You're either supposed to be a doctor or an engineer. And here I was in an English major studying history and philosophy. I guess my mom wasn't very happy. And she still tells me, why don't you get a job? So it had been a journey. It had been quite a journey. It was against all odds. And before I knew it, and here's we're talking about accidents and non-accidents. Here's the miraculous part. On 14th March 2002, I was supposed to drive back with Tamal Krishna Goswami from Mayapur to Calcutta. And that night he called me and said, why don't you go to Calcutta and see me tomorrow morning? I'll see you at the airport. And I wasn't very happy. The journey back at night was risky. And in the next morning, about 5:18 a.m. in the morning, I got a call from a friend saying that the car had an accident and he passed on. And interestingly, the night before, we were planning where people would sit. And that morning, a girl passed away. Her name was Vrindavaneshwari. And the night before, I was thinking of sitting in her seat because I'd be diagonally opposite to Maharaj, and I could speak with him on the road. And so I kind of had my life spared. And he was the one who insisted time and again that he was getting his PhD in this subject matter because there's a great need for people to study and present this tradition with authenticity in an articulate way. And he really wanted me to do that. I wasn't sure, but it was his death that convinced me that I had a second leash in life. I could be gone any moment. So it was very existential, like what Galyna said. It was an existential kind of angst that got me to this. And then before I knew, I had applied to Oxford from a very small, college in Calcutta. We were the second batch of students in that college building. And there was no way someone from that small liberal arts college would get accepted at Oxford. However, when I finally managed to go to Oxford, the director of the OCHS, the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, gave me a big hug and said, Tamal told me about you. And 3 years later, they actually remembered his recommendation. And when they saw my application, they knew that I was that candidate. And so it was my sincerity in trying to serve in whatever capacity I could, and his blessings that got me where I am. And then at that point, I realized that, a lot of people read the Gita, but the best translation of the Bhagavad-Gita is its translation into one's life. If you are not able to translate that message into your life, it's like reading a recipe book, right? You can read all the recipe books you want, but unless you actually get into the kitchen, get the ingredients together and do something about it, the recipe book has very little value, right? And that also brings me back to Rahul and Galyna's book. One of the things that struck me about this book is its practical everyday applicability. In fact, one of the things that they have done, and here I'll get a little academic and technical, is they've taken a concept from Vaishnava Vedanta called Panchabheda, 5 kinds of differences. And they say that if you look at reality, you would notice 5 components, right? You would notice that you exist as an individual. At the end of the day, if someone slaps your image or your picture, you won't feel that hurt. Whatever experiences you have is very personal, very subjective, right? It's you. Nobody else can experience your pain or your happiness And as it is said, nobody else can go to the bathroom for you. There are only some things you can do. And that is the principle of jiva. Ji means to be born, to live, like the word genesis, janma, ja means birth. So jiva is something that experiences the world. How do they experience the world? In time space. If you look at, and Rahul will elaborate more on this, in time space, in the sense we all exist in space and we exist in time. Now, space and the objects we see around us is prakriti. And prakriti is made of three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, just as the light that you see around you are made of three primary colors, right? All the colors that you see are a combination of those three primary colors. Right? Similarly, all of the space and materials that we see is made of those three primary gunas. But life runs on another track, which is time, right? And time is a component of reality that's without the gunas. You can put gunas on time. So you can be having a great time but destroying yourself, and that would be in tamaguna. You could be working very hard, thinking that I will enjoy after I worked hard. And that's like, I will enjoy not while I am dancing, but after I finish dancing. That's in Rajaguna. But when you take a step back, you put in the right effort, in balance, that's Sattva-guna. So Jiva is the person who's experiencing everything. Prakriti is space and objects around us, the components of reality. Time is the basis on which reality happens. And when you have these three, these are active things. So Jiva does something, that's karma, right? And every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you do something in the universe, you'll get back something in return. And there is that principle that controls all of these other four, and that's called Ishvara. And in the Bhagavad-Gita and the yoga text, Ishvara is sentient, it's a person, right? So these five components of reality is what makes life work. And the funny thing about the Gita is you don't have to be a believer to understand these concepts. It's very, very philosophical. Even an atheist could get it, right? There are no presumptions. It is the most accurate description of reality based on reason and evidence, right? It takes some time to get it because it's a philosophical text and there are abstract presumptions, but at the end of the day, it is very, very reasonable, right? And so that's what I saw was at the heart of this book, but I'm their host, so I'll remain silent and I'll let them speak. The big question in today's room is, why are these abstract concepts still relevant today? And Galyna and Rahul could speak on a few things from their book, and then we will open up the floor for Q&A and conversations.
So I will just say, you're asking why are these abstract principles relevant? So my take on Bhagavad Gita is that Bhagavad Gita is an instruction manual, and thank you so much for making it easy for me to now talk about some of the concepts in the book. So as I've said, I believe it's an instruction manual, but instruction manual for what? Instruction manual for how you are going to run your life. If you buy, let's say anything you buy from a market, if you buy let's say a phone, or you buy a washing machine, or you buy a blender, all of that comes with an instruction manual, right? Otherwise you put your finger and turn on the blender and your finger is gone, right? Or you load your washing machine in a disbalanced way and the washing machine topples and vibrates and destroys itself. So you are also in this world, but where is the instruction manual for how are you going to lead your life? There must be one, right? So to that effect, I say that the Bhagavad Gita is an instruction manual. And as you rightly said, you don't need to believe in whether there is a God or whether there is a soul or any of that thing in order to understand how the instruction manual works. Why? Because it's a bit like gravity. Whether you know that the formula for gravity is equal to the force of gravity, small g, is equal to big G multiplied by big M, multiplied by small m, divided by r to the power 2. Whether you know or you don't know that, if you were to get, if you are standing on top of a building and if you get slightly disbalanced, you're going to fall and you will feel the same pain. Doesn't matter how mathematically advanced you know the theory of gravity, that doesn't prevent you from falling. Doesn't matter you don't know about this theory, you still fall, right? So now let me come back to how I summarize those 5 concepts that you talked about. So what I say is that Bhagavad Gita basically tells you how a jiva is embodied soul, people like you and I, interacts with Prakriti, and Prakriti you were just describing, this material nature, everything around you is Prakriti or the environment, in Kala. So this interaction is obviously happening in time. So if this interaction is happening in time, it must be governed by something. What is governing that interaction? That interaction is governed by the laws of karma. So now if the laws of karma are determining these interactions, then if the law is there, then there must be somebody who has designed this law. There must be somebody who's designed this matrix, whatever you call it, right? Logically speaking, there must be. So that conceptually you can understand that is Ishvara. Whether or not you believe there is a Ishvara, there is a Bhagwan, there is a Paramatma, that's a discussion which we can go into. But conceptually you get it. And the other objection that you might have to this concept is, when I'm saying you are a jiva or an embodied soul, so whether or not you believe that there is soul, it's immaterial. You, even if you don't believe in that, you still, as an individual, interact with nature. There is no taking away from that. There is time that is running at the background. There is no taking away from that. And there is something that happens that is governing your action. If I were to, obviously this is a 2-dimensional screen, so I can't demonstrate that. But if Abhishek was right in front of me and if I tried to punch him, I think the natural reaction would be to punch me back. He may not react in that way immediately, and he may decide, okay, I'm going to tell him, I will punch him at my condition, at my chosen time, not now.
I would probably turn my other cheek, but
you will probably turn your other cheek. Okay, that's also a reaction, right? So some kind of a reaction is going to happen, right? So some reaction is going to be expected. So whether you believe it or don't believe, you can immediately go and demonstrate. On contrary, let's say if I go and I know Abhishek is from Bengal, and if I bring him Rasagulla or I bring him Mr. Dahi, obviously he is going to feel nice about it because that probably reminds him of his home. So that's basically the law of karma. So these are basically linked concept. And again, if you want to go finer and if you want to understand, there are 4 concepts in this which are kind of non-material, and there is one concept which is material. So when we talk about jiva or soul, we say that soul is an alien in this material world. It's a spiritual entity. And then when we talk about kala or time is something which keeps happening in background. That's also not something which is quote unquote material. Laws of karmas are just laws, or just framework. And Ishvara, of course, the supreme designer, is not part of the material universe. Now let's come back to that idea of Prakriti or environment. Now that itself, if you go to the Bhagavad Gita chapter 11, it says there are 24 elements that create this entire thing that you see around you, which is material in nature. Now, again, a student of chemistry will come and argue that there are 108 elements. You are talking about 24 elements, but then all those 108 elements that the chemistry student is going to talk about, they're all contained in what we call the Panch Mahabhuta, which is the earth, the water, the fire, the air, the ether, and the space. And beyond that, we talk about 19 other elements which are not mentioned in your chemistry, right? So that's the depth of the scriptures. And the interesting thing to note here is that all these 24 elements come into being when time comes into being, when time is blown into the system. So the time is when everything else comes into being. So if you were to ask what was before time, that's an absurd question. There was nothing before time. Time is the canvas on which all this happens. And again, from a different angle, you in the opening remark, you said that last year was barely like 35 days back, we didn't know each other. And then we know each other, and that's obviously playing in time, right? If there is no time, and I like this quote from Einstein, time is something that prevents everything from happening at once. Because if there is no time, then me meeting you and me not meeting you, or me coming to life or me dying, it all happened at once. So what does it mean then? Then it's all a singularity. So again, on the relevance and the practicality of the book, whether it's relevant today or not, I will pass it on to my more educated colleague here to comment on that.
Yeah, that's Galyna.
Is that me? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what was I supposed to talk about? Because yeah, relevance. Yeah, I wanted to talk about something else. I mean, about the relevance, but not related to time, actually. In our book, we are talking about this happiness equation, which is attainment minus desire. So, you see, it's like you have to keep your desire under control in order to keep the equation positive, right? So then we had a few talks with IIM people, and they're all like, management brain and mathematical brain, and they are all wanting to know the equation. I mean, like, how to keep this equation. So it basically, like, mechanically, in order to be always happy, you have to keep your desire at 0, right? So well, and then I was thinking, why are they asking this question? And then it just dawned upon me. I've heard that, like, not once in lectures and read it in the books, that you can, you have to control your material. So technically it is true, your material desires have to become 0. So you have to reorient your desires. You have to make your desires sort of like in non-material, immaterial, so that, that's when they become 0, and that's when you become eternally happy. That's basically when you're looking for this bliss, like when you're doing everything with the realization that you want to have this, you are doing things for the eternal bliss. Hello? Oh, you're showing that. I was like, I'm disappeared. So and like when we this is related to our to the fact that we have to do our duty without being attached to the consequences and to the result of our work. And this is also related to reorientating our desires, doing everything for the satisfaction of the divine cause, let's say. That's when the desires material desire then becomes automatically 0. And that is true. The equation is true. Desire is 0. Material desire is 0. Because we can't stop the desires, we just reorient them. So it's just a small, it didn't come to me during, I couldn't somehow, I didn't think about it, that your desire just becomes different in nature. Then sort of like material desire becomes 0. And then you sort of like happy because you're doing something for a different cause. Yeah, so that's something which I realized just recently. And then yeah, it's just that realization came to me. I don't know, you have anything to say about that?
I will just explain it. So there is a question by Raghavendra Vatsji which says, how is it possible to make the desire 0? So before I come to that, the mathematics applies regardless, right? It says happiness is equal to attainment minus desire. By the way, this is nothing rocket science, it's Bhagavad-Gita 2.47. So just put that in an equation format. So if you look at the equation on the first glance, it looks like a very very simple equation. What it's saying is that when are you happy? You're happy when you get more than you desire. Let's say you write exam and you wanted to get a B grade, but by some luck you get A. So you got more than what you desired. You desired a B, you got an A. So what's the result? You're happy. And then let's say you got a C. Now you got less than what you desired. You're obviously unhappy. So how do you make this positive? So, and this is just, I was just talking about exams, but you can apply this to anything. I mean, one way to keep like a job or like getting a house or like getting a car. So one way to keep this equation happy or one way to keep this equation positive is by trying to attain more and more and more and more, which is kind of the Western model. The Western capitalist model is, how are you happy? When you have a bigger house, a faster car, and more money in your bank account. So that's when you're happy. Whereas the Eastern philosophy, whether it's India or China or Japan, what they tell you is that, first of all, you can't control what you attain, because apart from you, there are so many other factors that go into attaining what you have attained. What you should rather focus on is on your desire. This is the part in your control. So the only way this can be positive is either attainment goes up or desire goes down. So the Eastern philosophies talk about controlling the desire. How do you control the desire? By knowing the difference between need and want. Now that's the first level understanding, but then there is also a second level understanding of the same equation, which is more relevant to the practical question that you are asking, Krishna. How is the Bhagavad Gita relevant today? So, this equation also becomes the ethics equation, because any student who cheated in an exam, any salesperson who ever bribed, or any CEO who ever fudged financials, they all did for one reason: their desire to have the desired result overpowered them so much that they did whatever they could to attain that desire. I repeat, what basically happened in all these cases was that the desire to attain whatever they wanted was so strong that they used whatever means that they could get in order to reach there. So a student cheated in the exam because the student so badly wanted an A grade. The salesperson bribed because so badly that salesperson wanted to meet their quarterly target. The CEO fudged the number because they so badly wanted the valuation of the company to be a certain level. So that's the second level understanding here, that, hey, you need to really know how to take care of this desire part, because honestly, there is no end to human desire. Now, there is a third level understanding as well. So which is what I was hinting at earlier as well. What you attain is not entirely a function of what you do. Like we talk about in the theory of karma, that whatever you do is basically a function of 5 things. It's adhisthanam, which is platform, which is basically your body. Then there is karnam. Karnam is basically your, like we have this word upkaran in Hindi, which basically means instrument. So karnam means basically all your limbs and all your sense organs and working organs. That's karnam. Then there is chesta. Chesta is endeavor, which is basically endeavor to do something. And then there is divine. Divine is the divine will. And most importantly, there is this concept of karta. Who is the doer? This concept of, am I doing this, or am I just a nimit matra, or am I just a medium in this? So I'm trying to repeat what I'm trying to say here. So there are 5 things. There is adhisthanam, which is the platform, which is your own body. Can you take away your body from something when you're doing something? You can't. Can you take away your limbs, your eyes, your nose, your sense organs? You can't. So that is the karanam part. You can't take out that. Can you take away chesta? Can you take away endeavor? If you take away endeavor, then there is nothing happening. So you can't take away endeavor. Can you take away the divine will? No. What can you take away? You can take away this egoistic thing, egoistic sense of this belief that you are the doer, because honestly, you are not the doer. It's like, a very beautiful pen, which is in the hand of an author, someday decides that, oh, I am the doer, I am writing this book, and this author is getting all the good name. It's me who is the real writer. The pen will not be able to write even 2 words, because actually pen is not the doer. And we are all like that instrument. We are all like that, those pens in this divine scheme where we are playing our part, but we are actually not the doer. But coming back to this attainment equation. So anytime you start believing that whatever attainment is there is because of you and you alone, that's a fallacy. It's not you and you alone. And that's the third level understanding, which I wanted to emphasize on, which is you can only be effort driven. You can't be result driven. You really can't control your results. You can only control your effort. So focus on what you can control, which is your effort. Put your 100%. You can't control whether you get an A or a B or a C in exam. What you can, however, control is how much time and effort you put into studying the subject, where studying is more important than the grades you get. The process is more important than the result. The journey is more important than the milestone. So that is the important thing to understand here. Now, after understanding these 3 levels of understanding, we can take that question which Raghavendra ji is posing. How is it possible to make desire 0? The simple answer is it is not possible. As long as you are in this human body, at least I don't know, from a practitioner point of view, I will say it's not possible. Maybe Abhishek ji and Galyna can add if it's possible, but I would say as long as you are in this material world, it's not possible to make this desire 0. However, what is possible is to make this desire more magnanimous. On day 1, if your desire is only to have more money for yourself, a bigger house for yourself, a faster car for yourself, that's a very selfish desire. That's a desire which is only about you and myself and I. But can you just slightly broaden that desire? Can you then start talking about, okay, how can I do something which not only benefits me, but benefits people around me, which is basically saying that can I do good at the same, can I do good for myself? At the same time, can I do well for society? So let's say now your desire is, okay, I want to set up a school, because just like Abhishek talked about, somebody who was doing a PhD in Cambridge told him there are enough doctors, there are enough merchant navy guys, but there are not enough teachers. Now, what that person was trying to say to Abhishek is that, hey, you need to focus beyond merchant navy, which is going to solve for yourself. Can you solve in a way that you acquire this knowledge, distribute, such that your desire is not about yourself, but about serving others, about helping them navigate this difficult journey of life? Now that then fundamentally shifts what you call desire. It's no longer selfish. It's becoming slightly magnanimous. And as and when you try to grow that idea of what am I desiring, that's when it kind of tends towards zero. When I say tends towards zero, what it means is that your own selfish desire doesn't become such a big contributor to this. Then what you are then talking about is again, which Abhishek was trying to hint on, this concept of interconnectedness, Brahman, right? He said we are individual, but at one point we're also connected. That's how the law of karma also operates, because essentially when it says you do good, good will happen to you. When you do bad, bad is going to happen to you. All it's saying is that if with your right hand you're trying to cut your left hand, sooner or later you will feel the pain, because we are all interconnected in the system. So to make this desire zero, it's not possible. But what is possible is to make this desire more quote unquote pious, more magnanimous, more bigger. And that's a process. How do you start that process? You start with yourself. You start first with making yourself capable. It's a bit like, when you are taking the aeroplane, they always tell you that before you try to help other, put the oxygen mask on yourself. Why? Because if you're not stable, how are you going to help others? So to that effect, what you need to do is, once you are somewhat stable in your life, you are able to take care of your basic needs, try to see if you can help others. Try to see, can you help others by donating a part of that, let's say whatever you earn, and start with 10%. And that's when you will realize it's very difficult. It's very difficult to part with your hard-earned money. But that then starts the process of you parting with what you thought rightfully belongs to you and starting to give it to somebody else. And gradually, when you keep building on to this process, 10 will become 20, 20 will become 30, and you will reach a stage where you start naturally thinking about more than just yourself. That to me is the closest you can go to desire being zero. But frankly, my honest answer to that is that in strict sense, your desire cannot go to zero. It can only tend towards zero. Yeah, let's Krishna ji, let's take questions.
Thank you so much for that exhaustive answer. I think your slide is still on.
Yeah, my slide is still on. I can stop the slide, okay, and then we can go in the discussion mode.
I'd want to open up this session to more questions, so feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to type out your answer in the chat box, I will read them out and we will try to answer. And till I see questions appearing here, I'll just add to what Raghuvinderji asked. When we plant a seed, you cannot, in your rational mind, start dreaming about the fruits. There is a very good chance that it might not even germinate. But if it germinates, that is your success. And then if it grows, that is your success. But during that, you have to keep putting in regular sunshine, nutrients, water, pay attention. Right? So in that sense, we have very little control of the outcome of our activities. All we can do is focus on activities that might bring a particular outcome we desire. But that expectation, and I think the key word here, at least in my understanding, is expectation, right? So what we, in that equation that Rahul and Galyna shared, happiness is attainment minus desire, I would kind of go deeper into that, the quotient of desire, and say, what we're really talking about here is expectation management. right? That is, when we meet somebody, there are, whether we like it or not, we have certain expectations. And that expectation turns into desire when we become entitled, right? So expectation plus entitlement equals, I just made this up, equals desire in my understanding.
In fact, that is exactly how we have explained both the examples you gave about this,
There you go.
this planting the seed, and then we go on to, in fact, it is the exact example which we have in the book, that once you plant the seed, how are you so sure that it's going to grow? And if it grows at all, how are you so sure that a goat or a cow is not going to eat it up before it reaches adulthood? Even if it reaches adulthood, how are you so sure that no disease will catch on to it and you will actually get the fruit? So all those uncertainties are there. And then that desire, exactly what you said, is basically, when I say the desired outcome, I mean what expected outcome you are thinking from it, right? And that expectation is exactly it is what you just said. It's a management of expectation. Can you you may expect whatever, but then you really have no control on. I mean, you can plant a mango seed, and first of all, planting, some people plant a lemon tree and expect mango. That is itself is a misplaced expectation. But even if you plant a mango and you expect mango, that itself might never fructify in a literal sense.
That's right. That's right. And I always wondered when Krishna says "Karmani eva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana." Seriously, I'm going to school to earn money. And if you tell me that, yeah, you just go to school, don't worry about money, it's very counterintuitive. But the fact remains that, life itself makes more sense if it is counterintuitive. And this was Arjuna's predicament. Arjun was, he had full confidence in his abilities as a warrior, right? But his expectation was that he wouldn't need to fight people who are near and dear to him because they would behave ethically. And that was the biggest, kind of backfired expectation of his life. I mean, he just looks in front of him and suddenly he sees all of the people he went to school with, his cousins, his grandfather, his teachers who loved him, right? With their weapons drawn at him. Arjuna's expectation was, like, Nanna kaise hai? Right? And suddenly Arjuna sees this battlefield and he says, I want to quit, because the second expectation is, if I become a monk, then none of this will happen.
I can prevent these deaths. Yeah.
I can prevent these deaths and everybody goes away happy. Why? And Krishna makes a very simple point, and I will conclude my comments with this. When you read Shastras have to be read in conjunction with one another. And one of the most famous verses that practically every Indian kid in the 80s knew is Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata vyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamiham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So dharma, to re-establish dharma, I appear time and again. Now, what is this dharma? If you look at the Vedas, the question is, nobody really knows, except you can translate it as justice, duty, and in Vaishnava Vedanta, dharma is translated as a natural characteristic.
Yeah.
So the dharma of the sun is to shine, the dharma of water is to flow, and the dharma of every living being is to enjoy by serving and being served. And if you look at our economy, if you look at family structures, that's what we are doing. However, real dharma is the practice of 4 values: satya, or integrity; saucha, or cleanliness; tapa, or enterprise; and daya, or empathy. And whenever there is a decline of these 4 values, Krishna comes back to reestablish them. At least that's the promise in the Gita. So for Arjuna, it wasn't about his expectation. As Rahul pointed out, we have to kind of start with ourselves, but keep expanding the circumference of our identity. When people go for a football match, of course, in America, football means something very different from the rest of the world.
Soccer.
But if somebody, Soccer. If somebody goes to a soccer match, they never want their team to lose. That means they have expanded the limits of their ego to the soccer match, to the team that they're playing, to the jersey that they're wearing, right? And if there is, say an India-Pakistan cricket match or an India-Pakistan war, people on two sides will expand the limits of their ego to identify with what, the flag that they stand for, the map that they stand for, and so on and so forth. And Krishna points out that somebody who is Brahma Bhuta, right, who has realized the collectivity of all life, is able to serve and be friends with the entirety of life that they see around them, all forms of life, right? And so in the Gita, Arjuna's expectations and worries were very limited to himself as a warrior, to the possibility that his brother Yudhishthir would become the king, or they would lose the battle, right? And there was every chance that they would lose it. And Krishna's point was, don't worry about that. Fight the good fight. Fight the good fight, because when you do that, you're standing up for these four values that sustains the collectivity of life, right? And in this book, and Rahul also spoke about it today, the two major concerns are people and planet, besides profit. And if the Bhagavad-Gita has to add anything to the equation of profit, people, and planet, it is the question of principle, the fourth P. It's based on the principles that we fight the battle of life every single day. And without those principles, the battle of our everyday lives becomes meaningless. And the Gita ends with a verse which says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partha Dhanurdhara, Tatra Vijaya Sri Bhuti, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama, which means wherever there is Krishna and Arjuna, there is Vijaya, victory, Sri, opulence, abundance, and Bhuti, success. And so if we are looking at a planet that is prosperous, we are trying to attain societies that are peaceful, we are trying to build profits where, as they say in the Artha Forum, earn with integrity, spend with compassion, right? Then there has to be the question of principles. And what are those principles? They are the principles of dharma, integrity, cleanliness, enterprise or endurance, and empathy. And those even an atheist can get. Thank you so much for joining us today morning. We are open to taking more questions for the next 20 minutes or so. If not, we can, if you want to continue listening, Rahul can explain little tidbits from his book. He has some very scientific explanations to principles from the Gita. And I am sorry I didn't kind of talk much about our backgrounds, but Rahul went to IIM Bangalore, is that correct? And has a background in science, and he is a banker in Singapore. Galyna has a PhD from Singapore Technological University, is that correct?
Yeah.
And some of you know me already. I went to Oxford and University of Chicago, where my focus was Vaishnava philosophy, and I ended up doing my PhD, my master's at Oxford on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and my PhD on Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so, I am more steeped in the tradition than they are, but we are all here to answer questions that you might have. And thank you for joining us today morning. You can unmute yourself, ask, and Krishna Shakti has a question. You spoke about minimizing the desire. Is there a particular process that you find efficient in your practice?
Yeah, So I was
Don't
trying
take
to,
turns, yeah.
yeah, I had said, and I think you have answered that, Abhishek, and I think I have also tried to hint on that. It's expanding. So it's a bit of counterintuitive, right? So the question of who am I, which begins with, and you also said a beautiful thing, things which are counterintuitive make more sense. So when you start with self-inquiry, then if I ask you, if I say this is my hand, I just say this is my eye, I say this is my lips. So when I say, or I say this is my pen. So when I say this is my pen, that means this pen belongs to me. But when I say this is my hand, who does this hand belong to? So who is me and who is I here? So when you keep pondering over it, or what, then you start with, okay, am I this body? Then you say, okay, I'm not the body. I'm not this body which is made of skin or hand or leg. Then you go one level deeper. Then you start asking, uh, basically those panch koshas, the 5 layers that make up your body, including mind, intelligence, and everything else. And when you do this process of elimination, you ultimately logically conclude that you are an Atman or a soul. And once you have made that conclusion, which is basically an involution. So evolution is when things grow, involution is when things basically reverse of evolution. So you go into this involution process and then you conclude that, oh, I'm just a dot, which is soul, and that is my real identity. And that realization is so powerful that the moment you realize that, you realize, aha, not only I am that dot, but there are millions and billions of other people and millions and billions of other creatures which are also that dot, which are also that soul. And then you also realize that these souls at a conscious level are connected somehow. And more importantly, you also realize that so-called the inert world, the jada world, which we call jada, the one which is not conscious, that is also connected. And then you come to this conclusion that this is all what you would say Brahman. So the way Krishna Shakti, if I could address that question, the way to actually realize this is basically in a practical way. What happens is the moment you have realized that you are soul, you also realize that everybody else is a soul. And that when that realization comes, then you realize that everything is interconnected, and then your idea of self expands, and then this desire, this so-called what we call in English selfish desire, which is basically about me alone, this body, that diminishes. And then you start thinking about, as Abhishek was also saying, about the planet and people in a broader sense. So that is how you reach there. But this is a very theoretical explanation I have given you. Let's look at the practical way of attaining this, and that again begins with what I said. Whatever you do, all of us are doing some job, and in exchange of our labor, we are getting some money. Try parting a few dollars there. Start today, and you will see how difficult it is. Try giving like $100 today to somebody. You will see it's difficult. It's not easy to part. But overall, when you start doing, and in fact, we have done this in this book also. 20% of this royalty of this book goes to charity. I have written a few other books. This is one on Ikigai. 33% of this goes to an organization which makes sanitary pads for women. This is another book which I've written. 33% of this goes to 2 universities in Singapore. So this idea of giving is something that you have to imbibe slowly. When you start doing that process, when you start giving, the first day it's difficult, like anything. Gradually, when you start giving, it comes as a second nature to you, that giving is good, because then I'm thinking of not just myself, but for others. Gradually, that portion of giving increases naturally. I'm not asking you to sacrifice something. Do only as much as you can do without feeling so-called sacrifice, because when you are saying sacrifice, then there is no meaning. Then that means that you're compromising somewhere. You don't have to compromise. You have to give it in a way that you feel that this is the right thing to do, this is the correct thing to do. And when you keep doing that over time, could be in one lifetime, could be in multiple lifetimes, over a period of time, you basically get there. You get to a point where you move away from this so-called selfish desire to a more magnanimous outlook of the world.
If I may add something, there is a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita which says, Atmendriya Priti Vancha, Tar Nam Kam, Krishnendriya Priti Vancha, Tar Prem Nam. And so the basic formula there is love is much bigger than desire, right? Oh, sorry, this is, let me share it with everybody here. When we think of what's in it for me, that's desire. The moment we start thinking, I'm in it for you, that's where love starts blooming. And so if we think about any moment that we are experiencing some kind of an exchange of service, whether we are in a restaurant, whether we are on a call, whether we are on a podcast, the moment we are able to pause the question, what's in it for me? And flip that question around and ask ourselves, okay, what value am I giving? Right? That's where we are moving from the side of desire, which is selfish, to the side of love, right? And bhakti is basically, that paradigm shift. We had two more questions from Rajiv Gupta. So expanding self is the way to minimize desire. Yes, and but more than minimize desire, what we really want to do is purify desire. Minimizing worldly desire is the way to maximizing spiritual desire, right? So even Sri Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad-Gita, desires something. What does he desire? He desires to establish dharma. So it's not that Krishna is without desire and then he's preaching others to become without desire. No, there is desire, but there is no self-centered desire. That desire, when purified, becomes love, right? And Raghuvinder, she said, how about Ishavasya concept so that it's easier to part away something we think is ours? And I'll answer this and I'll open it to Galyna and Rahul. Thank you for both those questions. In the Ishavasya verse, I kind of looked at it and felt, okay, what about my kid? And, as a parent, you tend to be very controlling till the day you realize that your kids have a mind of their own. And that's the day you realize that no matter how hard you try, you want something for them, but they want something else for themselves. And I think the strongest realization there is they come through us, but they do not belong to us. And the same thing applies to the wealth we create, the possessions we have, and the desires we have. And I think about it this way. Everything that you see around you right now, from your nails to the screen in front of you where you're watching the podcast, to the house you are in, everything comes with a certain shelf life. It's there for some time and then it goes away. Everything. And then if you start looking deeper, your thoughts have a shelf life. The thoughts that preoccupied your mind 10 years back are no longer there. Your emotions have a shelf life. You might be really angry at somebody. You might be angry at that same person 10 years later, but you cannot be angry the same way because your feelings, emotions have a shelf life. So everything that we have around us have a shelf life. Now, when we want things that have a shelf life, there is an unspoken expectation that these things will not have a shelf life. And that is what's wrong with selfish desire. The expectation that what I want is going to be without shelf life. Now, Krishna points out in the Bhagavad-Gita, 2nd chapter, Dhyato Vishayam Spunsha Samgasteshu Pujayat. When we see something, you're walking down, say, Times Square, Manhattan, or you're walking down downtown Milan, and you see, one of these very fancy fashion stores, and you want to get it, right? Or you see something very attractive on Amazon, you want to get it. That's called Sangha. That's the desire to possess it. And then Sangat Sangjat Sangjayate Kama. That thing is Kama is desire. Now, here's the thing. If you fulfill that desire, very soon you'll be bored. And if you don't fulfill that desire, you will be angry. Kamat krodha abhijaya. Ja means to born, to kind of create. Krodhat bhavati sammoha. If you don't get it and you're angry, then your thought process gets clouded. Sammohat smriti vibhrama. And once your thought process gets clouded, you lose your memory. And so sometimes, I catch myself having a very bad argument with my father. And later on, I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that? Because my memory got clouded. I forgot who he was. I forgot what I was. I forgot the situation. And it's like, right? Because I wasn't getting what I desired. Sammohat smriti vibhrama buddhi nasha. That is the downward spiral of buddhi. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. And that is where you finish yourself. You kind of dig yourself in a deeper hole. Right? So how about that Ishavashya concept? Ishavashyam idam sarvam yatkintya jagatta tena tyaktena bhunjita ma gridaha. Gridaha in Sanskrit is greed in English. Sounds very similar even. Right? They're actually the same root. What is greed? It is when you want something without considering how it's adding value to somebody else. You're wanting something with the only question, what's in it for me? And that goes back to Rajiv Gupta's question. So expanding the notion of the self is where you minimize desire and you expand love. And once that keeps expanding, it's not that your identity goes away. Your identity is eternal. But the false identities that you add on, they are gone, right? Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that at the end of the day, even if you leave aside all religions, all philosophies, everything, you just sit by yourself and ask, okay, I'm not going to have any thoughts. What am I experiencing right now? The only experience we have is I am. And he says this in his book, Tattva Viveka, verse 23. I am. The moment you add anything to that I am male, I am 39, I am Indian, that's where you lose the purity of that I am. So that I am is eternal, it's timeless. But I am Indian is where you limit yourself. The moment you are able to expand by giving up those various adjectives that you add to what I am, that's where you begin to experience this universal love that is already there within us, right? So I'll conclude with that. We have about 7 minutes to go to 10:30 a.m. here. It's pretty late in Singapore. So thank you for sticking with us. Any last question of the day? Any last question? Someone says, thank you to our guests. Any last comments from Galyna and Rahul?
Sorry, Rajiv got on this side.
Hello, Rajiv, yes.
Yeah, so I just want to ask Rahul, what leads to give the headline of the book, like Atheist, and the name of the book? What drives to write the headline of the book?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And the answer to that question is basically the entire book in some sense. And the short answer is let's discern this with the definition of what an atheist is. And there are a few ways we can do it. Let's look at the English word atheist, and let's look at it a bit deeper. So the English word atheist comes from the Greek word atheos, where a means no and theos means God. So atheist typically is somebody who doesn't believe in God. So that's the English definition. And over here, obviously, the God is God, generator, operator, destroyer, the all creator God. That's the God that this theos is hinting at. Now, when you take that same word atheist in other languages, and namely for the purpose of this book, we have looked at how would you say that in Sanskrit. And it turns out that an equivalent is Nastik, which is na asti ka, which means nam is without or no. Asti means exist, and ka becomes one who believes. So one who believes there isn't, that is a Nastik. Now, the beauty of this phrase or this word is that it doesn't define that it. So now then we have a big question mark. What is this it? So in order to understand what is this it, then we have to look at some bhashya, some sutras to come to a conclusion, or some vrittis. So Panini being Panini, he's the greatest grammarian, and Abhishek ji would be much more versed in this than I am. In his Ashtadhyayi, he defines who a Nastik is. And in that, when you read that sutra, you, of course, because it's a sutra, it's very dense, you have to read some vritti on this to make sense of it. So the vritti which comes from Kasi, and hence called Kasika, that vritti basically explains anybody who doesn't believe in a hereafter is a Nastik. What is hereafter? Anybody who doesn't believe that there is something that exists beyond death, something that lives beyond death, that is a Nastik. So, and then there are other definitions as well. If you look at Manu Smriti says anybody who criticizes the Veda, that person becomes a Nastik. So by that definition, Buddhists and Jains also become Nastik, isn't it? Because they criticize the Vedas. But then if you look at Panini's definition etymologically, then it says anybody who doesn't believe in a hereafter. So if you look at Jains and Buddhists, they quote unquote don't believe in a creator God. Jains basically believe that the laws of karma continue on their own, and there is no need to invoke a concept of a generator, operator, destroyer God in order for this universe to function. Buddhist, what they believe is that a single entity cannot be responsible for creation of the universe, and hence they negate the concept of God. But when you look at this definition by Panini, what it's saying is anybody who doesn't believe in a hereafter. The question is, do Jains believe in a hereafter? The answer is yes. They believe in soul, which goes beyond life and death. The samsara is very much established concept in Jainism. Now, if you look at Buddhists, they don't believe in soul, at least not in the way that that Hindus believe. They believe, but they, however, believe in consciousness. They believe that consciousness transcends death. Consciousness stays beyond death. So now with this definition, even Buddhists and Jains now suddenly have become believer, or they have become Astik. But the question is, and your direct question was, what justifies the title of this book? Why is it called An Atheist Gets the Gita? So for purpose of this book, an atheist is anybody who is logical, scientific, and is inquisitive, and likely, I'm using the word likely, because of that kind of a training, is likely to reject concepts of soul and God and so on and so forth. So this book is written for people who are coming with that kind of a training. And then it is not, at the end of this book, it is not making you a believer or a non-believer. It's just laying down facts. So when it talks about souls, it says, okay, these are the research which have been done on soul, whether it's near-death experience, which has been done in Holland, and a paper has been published on this in Lancet, or whether it's Ian Stevenson's institute in Ian Stevenson, who was working in Virginia, closer to where Krishna Abhishek ji is. These are some of the concepts where some of the modern scientific work which has been done in this so-called the concept of soul. And then when we go further down and we talk about, let's say, God, also I have tried to explain how, as Galyna was saying, the universe is infinite, and because it's infinite, you can't see all of it. Because you can't see all of it, is there a point in speculating what is beyond, what is there, right? And galaxies are moving fast. They're moving fast in the speed of light. So no information from there can ever come to you. So you can never know what is there. Forget all that. Just look at this. We are part of this universe. That nobody disagrees. No scientist disagrees with that. We are part of the universe, and while being part of this universe, only being a part of this universe, we are trying to understand the whole puzzle. Can you? That is a bit like a computer CPU trying to understand the entire architecture of the computer. That's not possible. That's also a mathematical theorem. It's called Chaitin's theorem. Furthermore, there is Gödel inequality, which says that you cannot have a theory which is both consistent and complete and explains the universe. You will always have axioms. So even there, you are introducing what I call God of gaps. So there are a lot of lacunas that you can never ever explain. scientifically, logically, if you use a very strict definition of what science is, very strict definition of what logic is, because those same principles which establish these logics also tell you that nothing travels faster than the speed of light, so you can't get any information from beyond a 46 billion light year radius. That same mathematical, that same logic on which the entire mathematics is based also tells you that you can never have a theory which is both consistent and complete. And we have a mathematician in the forum, Atmeshwar Das, who can throw some more light in this. Then there are other things which our Isha Upanishad talk about. They say that, you know, whatever is emanating from me is complete, and while it is emanating from me, I am not diminished, I'm still complete. So it sounds counterintuitive, right? If I'm taking something away from someone, isn't that thing diminishing? But then when you talk about the concept of infinity, that thing is not diminishing, because infinity is infinity. 2 times infinity is also infinity, and infinity plus infinity is also infinity. So and again, there is a mathematical concept which talks about this. There is a theorem called Banach-Tarski, which is basically what it says is you take one ball and you can break this ball and rearrange it so that you get 2 balls exactly identical with the same density, same volume, exactly same. So how did you get 2 out of 1? And that's like, again, going back to that Isha Upanishad, how did you get 2 universes out of 1 universe? Because basically infinity is infinity. You can multiply it with 2, it is also infinity. So I'm trying to answer your question, but in order to really get an answer to that, a complete answer to that question, you will have to read the book to appreciate what are the arguments that an atheist makes, and what are the counter arguments that the other guy is making. So this book is positioned like a dialogue, much like the Bhagavad-Gita itself is a dialogue. So it's a dialogue between 2 people. One is a 25-year-old person, other is a 50-year-old person, and they are having this dialogue. So obviously it takes no, I mean, you can guess which one of these is atheist and which one of these is believer. The more mature, the more wiser of them is sort of a believer, and the young guy is a high-flying top student from recently graduated from top universities, and he obviously doesn't believe in any of this. So so anything which this senior guy is saying, this guy is countering it with science and logic, and then the other senior guy then counters it back with his own logic, with the logic which has just been presented by the other junior guy. And in that series of question and answer, just the way the Gita was, you come to the conclusion that yeah, an atheist can also get the Gita. So get over here means get means understand, but also at the end of the book, the very last line, what happens is that this so-called the young guy who is an atheist is actually gifted a Bhagavad Gita, which is a message to the audience that, hey, now that you have understood all this, go and pick up the Bhagavad Gita, because this was just an ABCD. You still have to go and pick up the real thing. I hope that tries to answer your question in some shape or form.
Thank you, Rahul. Any final word from Galyna?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, probably there's not much to add, because, you know, no matter how many times we read Bhagavad Gita, how many times we read all these things, there is still something new to discover. And Bhagavad Gita, no matter at which level of studying the scriptures we are, what have we read, and you know, which commentaries, which shastra, which kind of levels, Bhagavad Gita still remains something. Is like even when I write my PhD, I still have to sometimes open the grammar book, you know, and see whether I've written that sentence correctly, and, you know, like my reference book. So Bhagavad Gita still remains that, you know, that point of reference which includes everything. And because you read Bhagavad Gita, that's it sends you to look for some you know, deeper explanations of some other things in any other source, in any other shastra. So and it is applicable to the everyday life. It is applicable to our physical state, because it explains how the body is built. It is applicable to our mental state, psychological states. So it's still that point, that reference point, which we need to keep in mind all the time. And no matter how many times you read, it still remains up to date.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just add something here. Reading is not enough. Just like Krishna ji said, the best translation of the Bhagavad Gita is imbibing it into action. That is where you need to be. Reading is not enough. You can read as many commentaries, as many purports as you want, but you need to translate in your own life.
Thank you so much for to everyone who joined in today morning, evening, middle of the day, and thank you to both Rahul and Galyna for this wonderful conversation. And we'll keep you posted about future events, and you have a great weekend. Please take care, be well.
Thank you.